Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Midwest Chicago Booth Women's Network 2021 Beyond Brunch event. I'm Irina Schlafer, and I'm very excited to introduce you to today's speaker, Sheila Long. Sheila has a professional background in the corporate technology sector, but is most passionate about inspiring women to get connected professionally. Sheila has consulted for many boards, including University of Chicago Women's Network and the Project Management Institute. She opened and ran a co-working community for women and a head of table podcast. She can now add author and speaker to her impressive resume with the publishing of her book, Surrounded by Awesome Women. And that is all on top of being a busy mom of 3 school-age kiddos. Welcome, Sheila. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
I have so many questions as I was reading your book. One of the quotes you have in the book says that the perfect fit is when you feel competent, enjoy your work, and it aligns with your values. And I felt like that state of work was coming off the page when I was reading your book. Can you tell us what inspired you to write it?
To write the book, well, it is just women go through so many different emotions when they're launching a business, and I found that there's a lot of commonality based on like where they're at launching the book. I mean, not the book, launching the
Business?
business, and nobody really had it figured out. So since I went to Booth, right, I figured out a model and then I kind of put together like what are the different feelings that are like common when people start a business and when they've been doing it for a while, and how do they feel about financing since you're in banking arena. That was huge. Like just normally I found women are really reluctant to take on debt at the beginning, and it's really like a main source of like frustration for them that they're going to have to go into debt to like follow their dream. So I put that together in conjunction with this local university. I'm in Milwaukee, so it's called the University of Wisconsin Milwaukee, and they helped me I formulated the model but fine tune it and ask the right questions, and then I would continue to refine it, and they just encouraged me to publish it. And I didn't know what they meant, because but now I am a published author, but I didn't know what they were talking about, like how to go about publishing anything.
Sure.
But then COVID hit, and so this is my business, Malama Doe. It's a co-working community for women, and with COVID, business was not, we weren't quite as busy. So I started writing the book through a book writing class with Georgetown University. And then through the class, I met with 2 editors, one for about 3 or 4 months, and then the second one for another 3 or 4 months. And they just continued to have me develop my ideas. So
Mhm.
it ended up not really being about the incubator model, but it's really about celebrating courageous women. So here's my book. So at the end, my editor was like, "You know what awesome is?" I'm like, "No, I don't. Who are they?" She's like, "They're courageous women, Sheila. They're like women that take risks and have courage, and that's why we need to just celebrate them."
I love it. I love it. And you actually differentiate in your book a little bit the difference between a small business owner and an entrepreneur. Can you touch on that a little bit? I found that very interesting.
I did too for years. I was like, what is the difference between an entrepreneur and a small business owner? And are they the same thing? And
Mhm.
why are there entrepreneur conferences and small business owners aren't there? And why are there chambers that don't include entrepreneurs? So, what I've figured out is that, like in my model, since we're at Booth, I can talk about models, right? No one will think I'm like a geek or something. But like the first phase at this model that I created has 5 phases. And the first phase is discovery, where you're like, I really want to start a business and you never do. And then the second phase is canvasser, which is where you like have the ideas and you start writing them down and like building your brand and putting together some type of social media presence, promoting
Mhm.
your logo. And then the third phase is growth, which is where you start growing it. So I think in those 3, you're a total entrepreneur. because you're creating something that hasn't been created.
Hmm.
And then the next phase is prosperer, which is where you're like half reactive and you are like, it's, you really have to get work done. It's no more just branding. And so I think that's a small business owner. And
Hmm.
then the phase I want women to get to is the next phase is fulfillment, which is where you kind of figure it out and you're
Hmm.
happy. But my goal is they go to the following phase, which is expansion. And that is where you like scale your business. And that's entrepreneurship. So that's why I know it's a really long winded answer, but I'm like,
No, no, that's that's great because actually, when I think of an entrepreneur or a small business owner, I think of like the struggling stage, right? Where you're just trying to like figure it all out. And then the growth stage where you've figured some things out. So I was actually fascinated by the stages that you've laid out and that there's actually a lot more past that growth stage um in the model that you've laid out.
yeah, the women in expansion. That's why I started writing it down, like the emotional state of the people who would tour my space, because the women in expansion have like no fear. I call them like this nervous optimism, like, oh, I just opened another location, like, and you're not completely freaked out. Like, how big is the loan that you took out? And then the other women like can't name the business and they wanted to take me to lunch and I'm like, I don't really have time for lunch. I'm like running a
I'm a
business
small
here.
business owner.
Yeah, I have stuff going on. They're like, well, we just don't know what to do and we don't want to take on out a loan. So I'm like, okay, they're just very, it's a very different point
For
in
sure.
the journey, right?
What advice do you give women that are, seeking support, whether it's, you talk in your book about like emotional support, financial support, emotional, you talk a lot about emotions and sales support and staffing up at the right time. Like what advice would you give women um to seek how do you advise when they need a loan? How do you help out the women in your life that may be at these very different stages of this incubator model?
Well, that's a hard one. I thought a lot about this question today. Because how do you help somebody and who are you in their life? Like if you're a loved one, um, the first thing I did when before I launched this business was I listened a lot to the Booth podcast. Um, I'm going to blank. Anita Brick is in career services and she had a podcast like 10 years ago. I'm not sure if we still have it, but there was this book on there called The 10 Laws of Career Reinvention was featured. The author's name is Pamela Mitchell. And that book like changed my whole outlook because in the book she talks about how the people closest to you, like your loved ones, your spouse or your parents or your great friends, they cannot really help you when you want to launch a business. Like you are really on your own, because they don't want to see you fail and they're so afraid that it's not going to work out and that you're going to like all of the fears you have, I think, are like exponential for them.
Mhm.
So you kind of just need to not talk to them and just kind of chart your own path. And that's why I think this community is so important, that you have a group of business owners
Mhm.
alongside you to help you.
Yes, and you talk a lot about networking in your book and the importance of having various types of connections. How has Booth helped the Booth network helped you in your path?
I just love both. And like I know you learn a lot from going to class and the academic, but I just find the network is amazing and all the great people who you meet. And if we really work together, we can really build an awesome community.
Mhm.
So what happened? I was working in corporate at Motorola,
Mhm.
and I Booth Women Connect is this annual conference. We probably all know about it,
Right.
but it was just getting launched about Denise can probably tell me, but about 10 years ago. And I ended up, maybe longer, I ended up going to some of the meetings, and an alumni there, Aileen Cafaso, runs Enterpace. So
Mhm.
she became my coach. I hired her, and she explained to me the wheel of life. I don't know if
Mhm.
anyone knows about it, but I put it in my book because that's kind of really important at the beginning phases of um, launching a business and figuring out kind of like the different pieces. So I actually bookmarked it here. And so in it, there's the ones that Aileen outlines in her blog was like career, friends and family,
Mhm.
funds and recreation, health, money, personal growth, physical environment, and significant other. And you kind of need to gauge where you're at before you launch a business and then what your goal is after you launch it to make sure that one of those areas isn't like deficient.
Mhm.
And then so that just helped me tremendously. So I always check my wheel of life to see
Mhm.
exactly where I fall. And then Booth Career Services, Booth Women Connect is always so helpful. And actually, my idea came from Booth Women Connect from Waverly Deutsch spoke at it in 2015. And she gave a presentation called The Data Behind the Numbers in Women in Entrepreneurship.
Mhm.
And she talked about how women tend to start a business, never hire more than 5 employees, and then we don't scale it. We want to keep it
Mhm.
small and manageable, which ended
Mhm.
up in my model being fulfillment.
Mhm.
And so that kind of like got to me because I feel that it is nice to have it be manageable. But then
Yeah.
if we really want women to have bigger presence in boardrooms and running companies, we have to start scaling businesses. So that helped.
Yeah, and I think women a lot of women entrepreneurs are probably keeping it small and manageable because of these other considerations, friends, family, health, etcetera, money, because they're trying to juggle so much. I once heard, try to achieve balance not every day. Like you won't achieve balance every day, but if you achieve balance every week, right? So day to day, you may have days where you're working really long hours, or you may have days where you're, with your family, but so it kind of balances out on a weekly basis. But that should be the goal because to balance it all day to day is kind of an impossible ask some days.
Yeah, I still struggle with it. I'm not, yeah, I don't know. I'm not okay with it. But you need a community that's supportive. And Booth, like I became the city ambassador for Milwaukee,
Mhm.
and that really transformed me because I got to meet all these incredible alumni locally who I was with one today, and they became really great friends. And then later I was invited to be on the board, and that was just an incredible experience being able to just talk about how we should build a great network of support.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed my time in being involved in the
Isn't it
CBW one
great?
as well. And it's true, it's so refreshing. It's like invigorating every time you interact with other alumni. You're like, wow, there's women doing incredible things. So it's very refreshing and inspiring, like your book.
Thanks.
Um, can you talk a little bit about the different kinds of entrepreneurs? So you talk about like a necessity entrepreneur, a flexibility sidepreneur, which is I thought a very cool word, and an opportunity entrepreneur. What can you talk a little bit about the differences? And you mentioned also that the opportunity entrepreneur tends to be more successful in their business longevity. So, what can women do to prepare to kind of take advantage of the opportunities that come up rather than end up in an entrepreneur situation more out of necessity?
What a great question. I thought a lot about this too today. I think that, and I found when I wrote the book and I was interviewing the different women who were in it, um, none of them started out to be an opportunity entrepreneur, which shocked me because you're kind of like starstruck by certain people, like, wow, you're really amazing. And then they're like, no, I started this. Like Amanda Baltz is in there who's just doing amazing things with cardiac health on the cloud. And she's like, Sheila, I just wanted some flexibility. I had an 18-month-old and I was pregnant, and I just wanted to take a break. And then that she's really doing great things. So
Mhm.
but the types of entrepreneurs, there's like necessity where you just need a career and
Mhm.
money. A sidepreneur, you're doing it on the side. And then flexibility, you want flexibility. So I believe that the discovery is the first phase where people don't really have a business. And then in canvasser and growth, you can do that. And this
Mhm.
was controversial. My editor wanted me to pull this from the book. So maybe you guys can tell me if I should have pulled it. But the next phase of prosperer, where you start growing and it gets really stressful. I don't believe you can be a necessity entrepreneur anymore, or
Mhm.
a sidepreneur, or flexibility. Like you need to hire staff. You
Mhm.
need someone to run your home, someone to be the caretaker, or someone to like run your business, because you're just pulled in so many directions. And that's when you become the opportunity entrepreneur. And you can't, unless if you go to fulfillment and then you figure it out and you don't want to grow. But I think, I don't know, they didn't want me to put that in there. They said it sounded a little unfriendly. um I don't know. So
Do you think sometimes women hesitate to staff up because they are worried they think they can do it better, or they think they can, um that they're not sure how reliable how much the staff will help? Do you think that's some of it, or do you think there's the financial reasons for not hiring? Um I'm just curious why you think women don't outsource more.
it's trust. I had this in the model too. Like once when you get to like growth, which is
Mhm.
where I think you have to hire like in Milwaukee we have like 21 universities, so there's so many interns. So here everyone just hires an intern. Um but you need to trust them.
Mhm.
And if you give them a bunch of work to do, whoever you hire, and then they don't do it, then you end
Right.
up having more work.
More work,
So,
right.
so it kind of has, and like I struggle with diversity because you want to hire people that are different than you, but then it's really cool when you trust them. And normally you trust someone with a similar background.
Mhm.
Like right now, the person working with me, we both have kids, and just things come up, and we both, I don't have to apologize to her. Like my kids are getting braces, like I have to sit in the orthodontist I have to sit
Yes, it's constant appointments, right?
right. And she's like, fine, I'll handle the Wi-Fi if there's a
Right.
problem. Okay, good, and I just not having to apologize. But then as it grows, you just need to have someone else take your kid to the orthodontist. Maybe, I don't know, I'm still working on
Right, you need to figure
it.
out what part of your life you can outsource, whether it's the family appointments or the work appointments, right?
And it changes. And that's why that we Aileen with the Enterpace, like that wheel of life is just so critical, because you're like, well, they are getting braces. Like it is kind of a big moment. It might, I don't know. I'm still trying to.
No, it's true. I think a lot of times people assume you need to be more present when the kids are really small and need more tactical support, like logistics, right? You need to
Mhm.
help them shower, you need to help them eat. But actually, as they get older, they have just different needs. They have the braces appointments, or they have, you need to have just be there for them so they could talk to you about the drama with their friends or the emotional things they're going through. So I think it changes. And I think there's a more focus on kind of that infant stage and less focus on just support for, you still need time and support for your children when you're older. In the corporate world, at least, right? You get some maternity leave usually. You can't just, take time off to help your teenager with something. It's more challenging, I think.
Yeah, and then there's the vulnerable caretaker, which I initially had like 3 chapters on caretakers. My editor just graduated from college. She was 22. She's like, "Who cares?" I'm like, "Caretaking is a big deal." But
Right.
I
Women do
talk
so
about,
much of it.
yeah, and I talked about the vulnerable caretaker. That's on page 96. But some people just don't have support.
Mhm.
And if you have a child with special needs or something, like it is, or you don't have any family, or you're an immigrant, like it is, sometimes it's just harder to get a caretaker. And so as women, I really want us to support each other and understand. But there's a lot of there's a lot of hurt feelings, I think, that go on between
Mhm.
women.
Yeah, and I think you make a lot of points that there's a lot of incentive for employers, right? It's not just for small businesses. There's a lot of incentive for some employers to support women who are also caretakers because they contribute quite a bit in the workplace. And if there's not that support, they will go and open up their own businesses or figure out different work situations, and then you lose that talent.
It's not there's no easy answers, but I think just having the conversation helps.
For sure, for sure. I want to give an opportunity to the audience to ask some questions as well. We got one at registration so before today's session. It's a little bit of a different question, not directly to the book, but I think very relevant for the experience you have and can talk about. The question is, how do I start figuring out which boards to interview for and be a part of? What kind of experience do I need to start with to begin considering involvement with boards? So just kind of a little bit outside of your book, what you know, from your experience, what can you lend any advice to this
Yeah,
individual?
I think you need to do something that you're definitely skilled at and something that you care about and you can add value. Like I wasn't on the Project Management Institute board, but I did a ton of pro bono consulting for them, and I actually knew about it. And I'm a PMP, which is a nice credential you can get, but and it was easy and it kept me in the game too. And then I can now sit on their board, and also just things that you're going to do anyhow. Why not just be on the board? Um, and in an area maybe that you want to get into. And there's many groups. There's I think Women in the Boardroom is a great group. Booth, I was just in it. They just had an amazing session. It was like multiple sessions on getting on boards.
Yeah.
But and people are always looking too. And so if you have the time, obviously that's a great thing to do, but I would do something that you really care about because it
Mhm.
will be a lot of time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also maybe add that it is easier to get involved with nonprofit boards before you get involved with some for-profit companies, um, and definitely, private companies before you get into public companies. Those are very heavily scrutinized and would be a much bigger challenge to kind of get engaged with.
It seems like certain people always get tapped to be on board. So once when you get in that circle, they're always looking.
Right.
Yeah, that's for someone else, I think would give a better answer. I'm still learning too.
For sure, we all are. I heard a quote the other day, "If you're alive, you're learning," right? There's always something to be learning. So that's actually very Booth in nature.
Yeah.
And yeah. Okay, great. Um, talk Can you talk a little bit about how you picked the stories of the women for your book? Because you've met so many, amazing entrepreneurs through your work at Malamado, through Booth. Just I know you're involved in various conferences and things like that you attend and meet people. How did you select the story that went into the book?
The class I was in, I really think we should do it at Booth. It was so great. They just really, like in my business, the biggest struggle I have with women going to the next level is branding, which is where you have to talk about yourself and you have to put things out there. And through the book writing is really about, I really think it's about branding yourself. And so you have to go, they tell you what to do. They give you weekly assignments. It's like go on LinkedIn and put a post that you're writing a book and that you need people to be in the book. Like it's I was terrified to do that. And then Cindy Mackles, who's an incredible Booth alumni with Glue Advertising, I met her at, I think it was the management conference, but they had like a woman hour, like a
Mhm.
woman power breakfast before. So Cindy and I just exchanged cards, and we were both entrepreneurs. I hadn't even started my business. And then we connected on LinkedIn. So then she answered the call. So she wanted to be interviewed, and she's in my book. She has amazing stories. I did have to cut people, which I always like to include everybody. Um, so you go through this micro lending, no, not micro, crowdfunding,
Hmm.
which they have you do too, which is another completely terrifying thing. They have you create a video of yourself, send it to them, then they create this whole video about how awesome your book is that you aren't really sure it's going to be that great. But so then that goes out there on LinkedIn, and then people buy your book. So I sold like 137 books in December. And then
Hmm.
I ended up with 71 beta readers. So Irina, thank you for doing that, for being
My
one.
pleasure. It was,
It was
I
great.
think, a first for me. It was a first for me. I had not
It
been a
was me
beta reader
too.
for a book
Yeah.
before.
And so then the beta readers weighed in. Like there was one really high powered woman who I did a lot of research, I wrote it. The beta readers were like, what is this woman doing in your book? And they're like your friends, so they're telling you they don't want you to look bad. Like I had a whole TV chapter on women and TV, but
Mhm.
the beta readers were like, get rid of the TV chapter. But so the whole TV, I still have it, but it was not in the book.
It's for
But
a sequel.
it was great. I talked about Carol
For a
Brady.
sequel, you can use the material that didn't make it in the book, spend a little more time on it, and there.
Yeah, and then everything in the book, they're like, it goes on LinkedIn. Like, oh, it does. So that'll be coming. Where I have a whole article series coming to like just continue to promote
Promote.
something that's near and dear to your heart. So that's what they have with all of the authors. That's their goal, is that you keep doing it. But yeah, so I just kind of put together the stories and then saw what resonated with the beta readers. I worked with my editor. And then at the end, it's really cool to read the beta reader feedback, to hear
Mhm.
what people really like that wheel of life. That was like 2 paragraphs. It was, they were like, kind of your question, like, how do women get support? And I'm like, I have no idea. I'm like, but Aileen gave me the wheel of life. And then the beta readers, that was the number one thing everybody loved, was the wheel of life. So then I totally changed that chapter and added it.
Yes, it's very, very interesting. I found that very interesting too, because it's the constant struggle of how do you balance everything, right? I mean, whether you're working for yourself or someone else, you're constantly trying to balance all these things in the air. And as you said, women tend to see it as their responsibility more maybe to take care of the family and to take care of the relationship and to take care of everyone's health and etc.
And it just depends if you have support. Like if you have someone there who's helping, it's a different ball game.
For sure. What would be your advice for gathering support? Um,
Let's see. I wrote this down. I thought a lot about this one too. Gathering support for like when women launch businesses at the beginning, I think it's different with loved ones, where they just really, I think, need to just support you. But it's stressful, because if you've given up a nice paying job to launch a business, there is tension. But also women are, we really, and Dave Vasco, who's in the book, who works for Rockwell Automation, he's kind of charged with bringing more women into software engineering. He just said that he has found in like all of the years he's been managing, that women really need to know everything up front. And
mhm,
he takes that into account when he gives them a project to work on, that they're going to need to know what is in store for them, because they maybe have more that they're taking care of outside of work,
mhm,
or maybe that's just our personality. And then men are just, they'll say yes, and he'll have to really double check and make sure that they really understand what needs to be done.
mm,
um but it's we're a little more, I mean, and I really don't like generalizing, but there's just a lot of fear at the beginning, and there's a huge need for connections.
Mhm,
And as your business grows, it's very lonely. And then
mhm,
as you get clients, it is stressful.
mhm,
But then you're figuring it out, and there's just a huge sense of accomplishment once when you do it. And then if you can just keep growing, if we can get more women to go to expansion and to scale
mhm.
businesses, that is really great. But it really takes creating a supportive environment.
Yeah. Well, and something that I think um, you've done really well is you've connected with people in different industries, different experiences, different family dynamics, etc. And so you have this range of personalities in your network, and I think that is helpful probably for anyone, depending on what they're trying to do. If they have kind of a range of experiences in their network, they can then connect with the right person at the right time to help their business.
Thank you. And like just the people who say yes, like the people who agreed to be interviewed for my book, some people I feel really bad I didn't interview them. Um, but then you just hear people's stories, and they just said yes. Like, isn't that what what's that? There's a woman who wrote stories about warriors. Forgot her name, but she always says it's just showing up. You just got to show up, and you just
Mhm.
need to say you'll be interviewed. And it was funny to see how nervous people were being interviewed too. Like, I don't know what I'm gonna write, and then you're recording it, and
Yeah.
but it was like therapeutic too to have women tell their stories. And then I made sure I double triple checked with everyone to make sure what I wrote was okay, and I pulled multiple stories. Some people just didn't want their story in the book, which was fine
Mhm.
because it's really just about building a supportive community.
Right, and it's about giving an example that the reader can connect to, somebody
And
who's done this or that or the other thing, right, versus, like, any one particular person.
and there were some name changes, and then people come up to me and tell me they think they know who I changed the name to, and it's totally not that person, so that's kinda
Oh,
humorous.
that's interesting.
And so eventually the goal is to do like a YouTube channel where the people in the book, I will interview them because the beta readers were extremely concerned about the outcome of some of the women in the book. So that would be nice to just build a community.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience. We do have some time for networking. Um, we can do maybe 2 breakout rooms, and then we could switch in about 10 minutes, so that you can get to know everyone on the call today. Um, Please introduce yourself and maybe share something that you're working on or something you're proud of, or ask the group for advice on something you're trying to tackle. Um, Denise, can you help us with